Hi, my name's Hannah Hess, and this is my project for CUAI 5440. This is my curriculum, history, and life reflection, and I decided to do a Pecha Kucha. I've never done a Pecha Kucha before, but I've got these slides timed for 20 seconds, so it's going to be tough, but let's get to rolling. So, section 1 is about childhood and college, and how the 4 ideologies were visible in my education through elementary, middle, and high school. And since I don't have a career yet, I'll talk about college later in section 3. And I'm really going to focus heavily on my elementary experiences, and my first teacher was my 4th grade teacher. And I really feel like she had the earliest, biggest impact on me, and I feel like she was very learner-centered. And I remember her so fondly in our class because we did a lot of projects that were very hands-on, and I specifically remember the moon phases doing cool projects like the moon phases and Oreo cookies. So I feel like that was a big impact on my life as a learner-centered educator. And then the next person was my librarian, and I also feel like she was very learner-centered, and she had a student news team that was full of 5th graders, and I got to be on that, me and 5 other students. And that got me excited about learning and education and being a leader, and I feel like that was another learner-centered educator that had a really big impact on my life at an early age. And then my elementary school in general was very focused on reading counts. And reading counts is when you read books and take tests, and you get points for those tests if you do so well. And I love to read, and I was very into reading counts, and I always strived to get the most points so I could get the biggest medal. And I think that was a scholar academic ideology of my elementary school that had a really big impact on me. And then my Spanish teacher in elementary school, the school no longer has Spanish, but she was very learner-centered. Her classroom looked something like this, and she definitely had an impact on my life as I'm now going into ESL. And very learner-centered educator, and I remember a lot of Spanish from that class. And then in 6th grade, I had an English teacher, and she had for a project, we all made books, something like this, and then she took these and made them into hardback books. And I think she was very learner-centered, maybe with a mix of social reconstruction because she would talk to us almost as colleagues, but she definitely had a big impact on my life too. And then the next educator was my AP English teacher, and I had her twice, and she was the first educator that I really liked that was a scholar academic. And I really got to know her and understand why she was scholar academic and what that meant to her, and see the value in her being a scholar academic. So she had a really big impact on my life. Now the next section is about educational issues, and the topic that I've chosen is how have children's books evolved over time, starting in 1884, and in what ways have the 4 curriculum ideologies influenced these moments over the last 100 years. So, let me take a breath. Let's go ahead and get started on 1884. The first book is Huckleberry Finn. I actually read this book in middle school, which is kind of shocking. We just skipped over the N-word. The N-word is in this book over 200 times. This book is obviously still got some racist tendencies, I guess I should say. Is definitely not appropriate for schools, and I wonder if they still read them in schools. But the next book from 1920 is the story of Dr. Dolittle, and actually the original book had a scene in it. Thankfully it's not in the movie, but Dr. Dolittle bleaches the Indian prince's skin white so he can marry the white princess. Obviously that's very racist and not appropriate for schools. So then in 1938 we have the 5 Chinese brothers. Dr. Meyer, I know that you're familiar with this book. Obviously we can see by the illustrations that this is very racist and has a lot of racial stereotypes and is very inappropriate for schools and children. So I've got some articles on the sticky notes too that kind of say more information about these. And then if you're familiar with the Naughty series of books, here's a comparison on how they've changed the illustrations. As you can see, they're very racist and stereotypical and very not appropriate for children. And it's funny, these were from 1949. It's interesting how they've changed them over time to make them more appropriate. And then in 1964, we have our beloved Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which everyone loves, but actually in the original version, the Oompa Loompas were portrayed as African Americans, so very racist, not appropriate. Thankfully, it's not in the movies, they took it out. But this was from 1964, so still interesting. And then Dr. Meyer sent me this graph, and I think it's very interesting to see. It's from 2018, and we can see how the diversity in children's books, how it's, spread out. And we can see that white is 50% of it, and then the other races are kind of few and far between. Animals are actually the next one. And then this is from 2019, and I compared the two, and basically white has gone down 10%, and then all of the other categories have gone up about 1%. So better, but still not great. So definitely the world is shifting towards learner-centered and social reconstruction and changing children's books, but still not great. And then this is an article I read by a mom, and it's very interesting. She said the title of the article is, "I never realized how racist children's books were until I started reading them to my children." So, and then I've got some links on the right from the socialjusticebooks.org website about selecting anti-biased children's books. And then section 3 is about career and adulthood, and then begin with your first time being interested in being an educator. And what ideologies do you relate to? Who influenced you? So let me go ahead and get started on the first thing. I'm taking a breath for a second. I feel like I first became interested in being an educator when I was in late elementary school. My mom would volunteer for the church nursery, and I would help her. And that's when I first kind of figured out, and interacting with even smaller children than me, that I really love children. I love interacting with them and learning how they learn and playing with them and seeing what, they like to do. And speaking of my mom has also had a really big impact on me. She was a high school special education resource teacher for a very long time, and a lot of her main goals were just getting her students to graduate high school and get a job and become productive citizens. So that was my first experience with an educator who was very social efficiency. And then my AP English teacher, let me go back to her. She's very scholar academic, and she influenced me for a while there to become an English teacher and a writer on the side. So there was a while that I was kind of a scholar academic educator mindset that she influenced me to be. But then that later changed, because in my senior year I volunteered for what's called the Yes Club at DB, and it's where you get the opportunity to go to an elementary school during your lunch break and read to children. And I was assigned a kindergarten classroom, and that's what made me fall back in love with students again, very small elementary students, and that's what eventually influenced me to go into elementary education. And now that I'm in graduate school and getting my master's degree, I have decided to go even further into education in ESL. And this semester, actually, I've been doing some research on ESL students and how they're affected in the classroom, and how it's really unfair. And so I'm finding myself becoming social reconstruction. And to sum all of that up, my mom as a social efficiency educator, my high school English teacher as a scholar academic, me as an original learner-centered educator, but now becoming social reconstruction in some ways, I find all 4 of these ideologies swirling around in my head and having an influence on me in some way. So that's pretty much it. And I think the only thing I forgot to say was based on the children's books and how they're evolving over time. Basically, they went from, social efficiency, maybe some scholar academic, and now they're definitely evolving to become, and they're definitely influenced by learner-centered and social reconstruction to become more diverse, more sensitive to the needs of children, away from racial stereotypes, and more multicultural education. So definitely geared toward learner-centered and social reconstruction. So I think I covered everything. Woo! That was a lot to talk about. I have my citations at the end, and I'll attach my PowerPoint separately. And that was fun. That was a lot of talking in a short amount of time. So hopefully I covered everything. And if not, hopefully you can see it on my PowerPoint. And there is a lot of interesting links linked to those children's books that I just very briefly talked about. And I have a lot of scholarly articles that really dive into some of those books and talk about how they're very inappropriate and how books are changing over time. So that's all I have for my Pecha Kucha. And yeah. All right. Bye.